Today we're going to be talking about the Cambodian genocide, the killing fields, the survivors, and the search for justice. So where and what is Cambodia? Cambodia is a country in Indo-Chinese mainland of Southeast Asia. It is important for its trade routes that connect China to India and Southeast Asia. It is the land of spectacular temples. The Angkor Wat Temple is the temple city. It is known by the Guinness World Records as the largest structure in the world. It was originally Hindu, and then in the 12th century, it was converted to a Buddhist temple. The period that it goes from is the 9th to the 15th century, and it is considered the high point of the Cambodian civilization. When the Empire of Annam, by the Treaty of June 5th, 1862, ceded to France, the three eastern provinces of Cochin China, France, acquired several new neighbors in the Far East. From 1862 on, she was considered constantly occupied by her political and economic relations with these neighbors. She was led inexorably by her will to protect her conquest to further territorial expansion. The first result of her policy was the establishment of a protectorate over Cambodia in 1863. The next consequence was the annexation of three remaining provinces of Cochin China in 1867. The third logical step in her Far Eastern progress was an arrangement with Siam in 1867, by which the latter recognized her protectorate over Cambodia at the price of territorial concessions. A further advance was registered in 1874 by the establishment of a French protectorate over Annam. So right here we see French Indochina, we have Cambodia here, Vietnam's here, and Thailand. So again, we see it on a further out aspect. We see Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, and close up. And then we are going to be talking about Phnom Penh several times throughout this lecture.
Once Cambodia gains independence from French control, we have the Chameleon King who takes over. He is the prime minister. His name is Norodom Sihanouk, and he is going to be the prime minister from 1954 to 1917. So Cambodia became independent from France in 1954. And in 1965, in the midst of the Cold War, the United States government is going to begin to start sending troops to South Vietnam to bolster against the threat of communism. Cambodia's prime minister broke off relations with the United States and allows communist North Vietnamese troops to be stationed within Cambodia, and this is going to become a problem very, very quickly. Here you see where Cambodia is, and this is Vietnam right next to it. So, the Ho Chi Minh Trail was a military supply route running from North Vietnam through Laos and Cambodia to South Vietnam. The route sent weapons, manpower, ammunitions, and other supplies from communist-led North Vietnam to their supporters in South Vietnam during the Vietnam War. The trail was named after Ho Chi Minh, the president of North Vietnam. During the 1960s, the Ho Chi Minh Trail was actually a network of trails or pathfoots or roadways that are going to move these supply lines up and forth. The U.S. military forces are going to be aware of how much military and weaponry is moving up and down this trail to supply the Viet Cong and its enemies in South Vietnam. So the United States is going to target this area specifically and be sure that no weapons are moving up and downward. So North Vietnam is a communist government, and they're going to use those supply routes in eastern Cambodia. And the U.S. is going to respond by launching bombing campaigns called Operation Menu from 1969 to 1970. This is done by President Richard Nixon. And the hopes of this is to stop communism from spreading. We do not want Cambodia to help Vietnam in their communist takeover, so we want to stop it. Cambodia officials, led by Long Nol, favored ties with the U.S. versus the communists. Long Nol, with aid of the U.S., is going to overthrow Sihanouk in 1970. But this is where we see the total numbers. So, in just this area, The tons of bombs that the United States is going to drop from 1965 to 1973 is 2.7 million. And if we are comparing that with other bomb droppings, we can look at when the Allies are going to drop bombs in World War II, and you're going to see that only 2 million tons have been dropped at that time. So this is showing us that there is heavy pressure from the United States to stop this route from happening and being successful. Now, the total carnage, we have lots of deaths, unfortunately, from these bombings. We total between about 150,000 to 500,000 people that are unfortunately going to lose their lives during this time. Now, the impact of the bombing, this is just a quote that I'm going to read through. Civilian casualties in Cambodia drove an enraged populace into the arms of an insurgency that had enjoyed relatively little support until the bombing began. Settling in motion the expansion of the Vietnam War deepened into Cambodia, a coup d'etat in 1970, the rapid rise of the Khmer Rouge, and ultimately the Cambodian genocide.
Khmer Rouge. It was an extremist communist party under the rule of Pol Pot. They controlled all aspects of religious life, dissembling families, forcing people to work with their hands, and killing those suspected of being intellectuals, educated, or tied in any way to the leadership of the fallen Cambodian regime. They arrested and murdered class and political enemies, religious groups, and ethnic minorities, wherein 100% of ethnic Vietnamese perished under the Khmer Rouge. Pol Pot wanted to return Cambodia to year zero and is responsible for the Cambodian genocide between 1975 and 1979. Brother number one, Pol Pot, believed that in their jungle camps, the Khmer Rouge, led by Salazar, born to a well-to-do family, rebranded himself Pol Pot, which means the original Cambodian. And he developed the philosophy that would guide their genocidal program and turn Cambodia into our time's arguably most murderous, brutal, inhumane small country. Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge took control of the communist movement in 1966, and he created a communist ideology based on returning Cambodia to an idealized, pristine peasant society in which the corruption of modern life was to be eliminated. In the new Cambodia, the murderous Angkor ruled everything, and those with the shortest memories, children, were seen as the anchors of the new society. Angkor took Cambodia's young away from their families and indoctrinated them as soldiers, laborers, spies, and even executioners. This photo is of children teaching and learning about agricultural methods. Many were young, rural, poor, and uneducated. Now, some believed in the Khmer Rouge's revolutionary ideas, though not necessarily its tactics for achieving them. Some joined willingly, while others were forced to join. Within hours of arriving in the capital, the Khmer Rouge set about rounding up its 2 million residents and deporting them to the countryside. Without damage to a single building, whole cities were destroyed. The peasantry were depicted as base people and the April 17th, or new people. What we see on the map before you, where every dot on the countryside represents a mass burial site, known commonly as the killing fields throughout the Cambodian genocide. From 1975 to 1979, 2 million Cambodians were executed, starved to death, or died of exhaustion and disease. Their bodies were disposed of in the killing fields around the country. Cambodia is a deeply Buddhist country, with more than 90% of the country practicing Buddhism. The Khmer Rouge targeted religious groups, especially the Buddhists. At the start of 1975, there were an estimated 60,000 Buddhist monks in the country. At the end of the Khmer Rouge's regime, in 1979, only 3,000 were found alive.
Now on to the post-1979, the aftermath. By 1977 and into 1978, the Khmer Rouge army, based on xenophobia, was invading Vietnamese territory. This would lead to open warfare between the two nations. In December of 1978, Vietnam invaded Cambodia. Cambodians had little motivation to defend the Khmer Rouge. The Vietnamese took Phnom Penh on January 7, 1979, and set up a pro-Vietnamese communist government called the People's Republic of Kampuchea, which was made up of pro-Vietnamese communists who had deserted the Khmer Rouge in late 1970s. This brought an end to Pol Pot's rule, but he lived in the jungles where the Khmer Rouge had originated, and he never faced an independent trial before his fellow Cambodians, nor an international tribunal. This is where he finished out his life, dying on April 15th of 1998. This photo was taken in 1981 at the Tuol Sleng Museum. This museum was a school in the capital city of Phnom Penh that had been converted into the Center for Interrogation, Torture, and Execution by the Khmer Rouge. At the time, it was called S21 Prison. So this is one of the survivors. There were an estimated 14,000 Cambodians who were tortured and killed here. Most of them were from the Khmer Rouge that they suspected of being disloyal. Only 7 people ended up surviving. The pictures behind him are pictures of the people that died. So before they would kill the prisoners there, they would take pictures of them. And you can actually see them at the museum on their website, thekillingfieldsmuseum.com. Cambodia today. Over the last few decades, Cambodia blossomed economically, having reached lower middle income status in 2015. It set its sights on attaining upper middle income status by 2030. And thanks to garment exports and tourism, Cambodia's economy has grown at an average of 7.7% annually between 1998 and 2019, making it one of the fastest growing economies in the world. And to finish it off, we have our sources and references.